Some lawyers are expressing concern about the federal government's new plan to crack down on crime. Next week, Ottawa will table a new bill to toughen sentences and make bail harder to get. The legislation proposes to create a reverse onus for bail in cases of major crime, requiring the accused to prove why they should be released from custody. It would also allow for consecutive sentencing for violent and repeat offenders and restrict conditional sentences for a range of sexual offenses. It would also impose harsher penalties for organized retail theft. Michael Spratt is a criminal defense lawyer at AGP Law here in Ottawa. Michael Spratt, it's good to meet you. Thank you for coming in today, sir.
No problem.
You've heard the political debate about the state of the bail system and the justice system in Canada. The Conservatives have called it a revolving door for criminals. The Liberals say this new plan will keep violent criminals and repeat offenders off the street by making bail harder. What do you think the reality of this will be?
The reality is that both of them are wrong. And the reality is, like they have been for the last number of decades, both Conservatives and Liberals, but especially the Conservatives, are using important and serious justice issues as a political weapon, a political wedge to fundraise and sow misinformation. And that doesn't make anyone safer.
Right, but the Liberals are the ones who have brought in this plan, right? So what do you think of what the remedy of the government is to this?
Yeah, so a reverse onus, I mean, we've tried that before. There's lots of reverse onuses in the criminal code. The reality is that if you commit a serious offense, a violent offense, or if you're on bail and you commit offense, it's already a reverse onus or it's treated as a reverse onus. So if there is a problem in the bail system, increasing the reverse onuses isn't going to solve it. And there is a problem in the bail system, but probably not one that the politicians are really talking about.
Well, what is the problem in the bail system, right? Because it's not just the federal Conservatives and now the federal Liberals. We hear premiers, we hear mayors, we hear municipal leaders. I know there were pockets of real surges in violent crime in the GTA in particular, even if it did subside a little bit nationally. But what are the problems that you see with the bail system that they're missing?
Well, the first problem is that we are detaining more people now than we ever have before. Our jails are exploding with people who are presumed innocent. In Ontario, it's about 80%, and that's a figure that's generally consistent across Canada. And when you detain someone while they're presumed innocent in jail, it doesn't make things better. It actually makes things worse. The more people you detain, the worse it gets. Because I don't think people realize just how horrible the conditions of pretrial detention are. Imagine the worst situation you could, and then make it worse. And so you have people who are legally presumed innocent, and when they're in jail, they're cut off from their families, they're cut off from their jobs, they're cut off from treatment and counseling, because there's none of that in jail. And so they actually can come out, and they do come out, in a position that actually imperils public safety, can put our communities at greater risk. And so the solution of detaining everyone is not only unconstitutional, but counterproductive. And you know, the Liberal sort of solution of more reverse onus may be a good political shield when it comes to politics, but it's not actually going to help our communities stay safe.
So that 80% number that you referenced, I've read some reports where they say 80% of people in Ontario jails are waiting for a bail hearing or waiting to go to trial. So it's waiting to see if they'll be released or they're in remand until they get to the actual adjudication of what they've been charged with. Is it too many people because there's too many serious crimes, or is it too many people because non-violent or less serious crimes are leading to detention? How does it break down in your view?
Yeah, our bail system already, it's not a catch and release system. It's not a revolving door. If you commit a serious offense, most likely the police aren't going to release you. The Crowns aren't going to agree to release you, and you have to have a bail hearing in front of a judge or justice of the peace who takes into account criminal records and serious criminality and public safety risk and things like that. So these are already treated very seriously. And in our bail courts, especially here in Ottawa, it can take days or weeks to actually get a bail hearing. And so the real problem in our bail courts is access to justice. Now that's made worse when we treat minor offenses the same as major offenses. It uses resources. And when we have people released on bail, it's after careful deliberation. Now, there's always going to be people that breach their bail. There's always going to be offenses committed by people on bail. And these are sort of the anecdotal stories and situations that politicians point to. But the only solution to that is to deny bail to everyone. And that means ripping up our Constitution, ignoring, fundamental principles of, proof beyond a reasonable doubt and the presumption of innocence, and ultimately spending a lot of money to make communities less safe in the long run. And that's sort of not the conversation that we're having. That's not the nuanced conversation that our politicians are engaging in.
Well, there is, the reality of what you say you see every day, or when, I don't know if you're in court every day, but when you are in court with certainly greater frequency than most people, and then what people are feeling in their communities. I mean, the data can show you an overall decline in crime since the turn of the century, and that's quite pronounced. There was a spike after COVID, and now it looks like it may be dipping down. But people who are the victims of crime don't want to be told they're a statistical rarity, right? Like they feel it, they live it, and there is concern in parts of the country that the system just isn't working. So why do you think there's such a disconnect in the public impression of things and what you say is a reality inside the system?
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't do any good for a victim of crime or someone who just feels unsafe in their community to tell them you're safer now than you would have been in the 1980s, or you're at a very low risk of being involved in anything. That doesn't do much good. But also, the information that the public gets is often very skewed. I mean, we can look at some of the conservative talking points. That is, outright misinformation, and I'm going to give them credit because I think that they're intelligent people. I think it's deliberate misinformation that is being used as a political weapon.
But the Liberals have adopted some of the remedies, right? So if it's misinformation or not, it's now government policy, or at least the agenda here. And so it has moved, from the conservative question period lines to the policy of the Kearney government now, right?
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part, because there are things that we could be doing and real solutions that we could be offering people who are victims or worried about crime in their communities. And those are the things we aren't talking about.
Like what? What are the things?
We can support people on bail through programs like the John Howard Society Bail Program, a third-party independent verification system. We can make sure that we fund things like bail beds, where people can still have connection to their family, not be in these terrible conditions, keep their jobs, but be in a supervised environment. We can increase the use of technology like GPS monitoring. Ontario's actually done a pretty good job of doing that. And we can offer people real supports. For example, you can't get counseling or treatment for addiction or mental health while you're in custody. And being in custody is no cure. You come out worse. And when you're on bail, it's very hard to get into those treatments. And so if we could make mental health, addiction treatment, if we could make those available while on bail and make them conditions of bail, those are things that could actually reduce recidivism, keep the community safe. And those are sort of the nuanced solutions that don't make good fundraising emails or don't make good political attack ads.
When I was a local reporter in St. John's, I would cover a lot of court, and you would see people at the sentencing phase of a trial, and they could go to Her Majesty's Penitentiary in downtown St. John's, which was built in the 1800s and is a bit of a dungeon that needs to be replaced, and they would ask for federal time. So they could go above the 2-year threshold to get into the federal system, where they would have addiction support and counseling support that didn't necessarily exist at the provincial level. So as a final point, I wonder, the federal government's going to change these laws with the idea of keeping more people in custody because of the nature of the crime. The provinces are responsible for a lot of that. There isn't enough jail space, there aren't enough guards, there aren't enough public defenders, there aren't enough counselors and these things. I mean, do you think the provincial system is ready if this does lead to a material change and a spike in the number of people that are detained?
No, I mean, if keeping people in jail actually kept us safe, well, the United States would be the safest place in the world. Yeah. And it's not. And the conditions in jail, those 18th century conditions, they would be welcome. We've had people in jail give birth, murdered, sleeping on soiled linens. And our Superior Court in Ontario found that that is a deliberate policy choice. So it's not just that the provincial governments aren't doing a good job in making sure conditions in jail are conducive to rehabilitation and humanity. They're actively making it worse, and that is a policy choice. And that's a recipe for disaster when you have, federal legislation that doesn't really address the problem, and provincial governments that seem not only blind to the realities, but quite happy to make things worse.
Michael Spratt, criminal defense lawyer here in Ottawa. Appreciate your time today, sir.
Anytime.